Under the Streetlight, Part 1. George stood at the doorstep of his house, his face clouded with anger as he shouted, "I'm tired of this. Every day it's fighting, complaints. Get out of my house." Ajamal didn't respond. She squeezed her children's hands tightly, eyes filled with tears, and walked out silently. Her younger son, Azamat, hid a small toy in his pocket, something to remember the house by. It was cold outside, the first day of winter. The pavement had frozen over, and the wind whipped through their thin clothes, biting their skin. George slammed the door shut, glanced out the window briefly, and turned away. But the look in his son's eyes as he turned back to glance at him cut through George like a knife. That night, Ajamal couldn't sleep. The children didn't cry either. They just held each other tightly, using a thick bag as a pillow, waiting for dawn. Sometimes people don't realize how cold their hearts have become, but the cold outside, that is temporary. That night's frost, however, changed the course of an entire family's destiny. Part 2. A Light of Hope. Morning dawned. The night on the street had left visible marks on the mother and her 2 children. Though pale and trembling, Ajamal smiled so her children wouldn't lose hope. "My loves, I'm taking you somewhere warm. There are kind people who will help us," she said, trying to sound confident. They walked toward a women's crisis center not far away. Ajamal had once heard a neighbor mention the place. At the very least, they could find temporary shelter there. The center welcomed them warmly. A clean room, hot tea, and a soft bed. It all felt like paradise after a night in the cold. Ajamal wept silently in a corner, hiding her tears from the children. George's voice, his shouting, echoed in her ears. Soon she began therapy sessions with a psychologist. She admitted how guilty she had felt all those years, how long she had endured. The psychologist listened quietly, then said gently, "You are not to blame. Now it's your time to think of yourself and start a new life." That marked the beginning of her transformation. She enrolled in sewing classes offered at the center. Within a month, she began selling small mittens, hats, and bags she made herself. Orders grew, and with them, her confidence. Azamat returned to school. Teachers were amazed at how bright and thoughtful he was. His sister Ayana, too, resumed classes. Though quieter than others, she stood out with her intelligence. As for George, he didn't immediately feel the weight of his loss. The silence at home felt like a relief at first. But within days, he began missing the sound of laughter, Ajamal's voice. One night, he looked out the window and imagined 3 figures standing outside. But they were never coming back. 3 months later, Ajamal rented her own small apartment and rebuilt her little family. On the wall were her children's drawings. On the door, a small string with words hung, "Home is where the heart is loved." George once walked past that street. His eyes caught those words. His heart sank. But time doesn't go backward. A woman who has learned to love herself never turns around. Part 3. A New Chapter. After moving into her new apartment, Ajamal felt truly free for the first time. It was small, but every corner was hers. The scent of hot tea and the children's cheerful noise filled the home with warmth. Azamat came home from school and knocked on the door. "Mom, I want to draw. My teacher says I have talent. I joined the art club." "That's wonderful, my son. We'll support your dream," said Ajamal, tears of joy in her eyes. Ayana was preparing for a language competition. She stayed at the library, eyes glowing with determination. Their growth gave Ajamal strength. She began to dream of opening her own small sewing studio. One day, a local women's business support center announced a grant competition. Ajamal submitted her proposal. She didn't mention her past, she only described herself as a woman ready to build a new life. She won. 6 months later, her sewing studio, Ayana Azari, opened. Named after her daughter, it not only offered sewing services, but also hosted classes for young women on independence, resilience, and self-love. Ajamal taught them herself, shared stories, and inspired them. Meanwhile, George couldn't adjust to the silence. His friends had drifted away. He lost his job. One day at the market, his eyes landed on a huge billboard. It read, "Bible Sewing Studio. Believe in the power of women." He immediately recognized the woman in the photo. It was Ajamal, smiling peacefully. The sadness was gone. In its place, strength, peace, victory. His heart clenched. He had lost her. And worse, she didn't need him to become who she was. She had found her way, her power, her truth. That night, George stood in front of a mirror and whispered, "What have I become?" For the first time, he felt regret. For the first time, he thought of change. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Ajamal told her new students, "Each of you deserves a fresh start." Azamat was painting a piece for an upcoming art contest titled Family and a Place to Shelter. Ayana won first place in her competition and gifted her medal to her mother. Ajamal never forgot the dark days. But now those days felt like the roots of her strength, because the greatest victory is to take control of your own destiny.